The message arrived on Tuesday. Humanity had exactly 73 hours to decide if we'd join a war we didn't start. Captain Ren Navarro stood at the observation deck of the GDF Hermes, watching as the last of Earth's special contributions were loaded into the ship's cargo bay. The creatures below moved with unsettling precision, their modified bodies barely contained by the reinforced uniforms designed specifically for their new anatomies. "You're sending those to represent humanity?" The Arcturian ambassador's voice cracked with what Ren assumed was the alien equivalent of horror. His translucent skin rippled with waves of deep purple, disgust, if she remembered the briefing correctly. "The collective asked for reinforcements," Ren replied, not bothering to look at Ambassador Kelks. "We're simply providing what we do best." What Earth did best, as it turned out, was creating monsters. Not the movie kind with extra teeth and poor impulse control. Though some of Navarro's units certainly had those features. No, Earth's monsters were once ordinary soldiers who had volunteered for the most extreme biological modifications military science could offer. The program had started innocently enough: enhanced healing, improved strength, better night vision. But when the Sagittarius conflict broke out 50 years ago, leaving Earth isolated for decades, those modifications evolved into something else entirely. Something the rest of the galaxy wasn't prepared for. "Your soldiers are abominations," Kelks whispered. "The coalition requested conventional military assistance, not, whatever this is." Ren finally turned to face the ambassador. Unlike her troops, she appeared completely human, an intentional choice. Someone needed to look normal for the diplomatic meetings. "The coalition," she said, emphasizing each word, "requested our most effective combat units after losing 16 systems to the Void Hegemony. We're sending our most effective combat units." Below, a soldier, if you could still call them that, paused on the loading ramp. Even from this distance, Ren could see the subtle shift in their exoskeleton as photoreceptors adjusted to the hangar's lighting. The modifications had gone beyond mere enhancement, they'd become specialization. Each unit adapted for specific environments, specific threats. "The hegemony's forces are conventional," Kelks argued. "Well armed, yes. Numerous, certainly. But they follow the understood protocols of galactic warfare." Ren laughed, a short, harsh sound. "And how's that working out for your coalition? 16 systems lost in what, 3 months? 4, Kelks admitted. "But there are rules. Rules that the hegemony follows only when convenient," Ren cut in. "We've reviewed the battle footage. They're not concerned with minimizing civilian casualties or preserving infrastructure. They're exterminating populations and strip mining planets." Even so. The ship's intercom interrupted whatever moral argument Kelks was preparing. "Captain Navarro, final loading complete. Combat units Alpha through Delta secured. Awaiting your command." Ren tapped her wrist console. "Prepare for departure. I'll be on the bridge shortly." She turned back to Kelks. "Ambassador, you've delivered your concerns. They're noted. Now, if you'll excuse me. Your government never mentioned these modifications during the coalition recruitment talks," Kelks said, his skin now pulsing between purple and a sickly yellow. "You never asked what we became during our isolation." Ren stepped past him toward the exit. "Perhaps you should have." First contact with the coalition fleet went about as well as Ren expected, which is to say, terribly. Admiral Zan Voss of the Coalition Defense Force stared at the feed from the cargo bay, mandibles clicking rapidly in what Ren had learned was extreme agitation. "This is a violation of at least 7 galactic conventions on sentient rights," the Admiral said, compound eyes narrowing. "What has your species done to these individuals?" Ren maintained her practiced diplomatic smile. "Nothing they didn't volunteer for, Admiral. Each modification program has a strict consent protocol." "Consent?" The Admiral's translator struggled to convey the mixture of outrage and disbelief. "No being would consent to becoming that." On the screen, Unit Alpha 7 was undergoing final equipment checks. The soldier's skin had the mottled gray texture of adaptive camouflage tech, while augmented limbs moved with inhuman grace. What had once been eyes now resembled multifaceted optical arrays, and the breathing apparatus that covered the lower portion of their face concealed teeth designed for environments no human was meant to survive. "You'd be surprised what humans will volunteer for when their world is threatened," Ren replied. "During our isolation, we faced extinction multiple times. These programs kept our species alive." Admiral Voss turned away from the screen. "And you expect us to fight alongside these abominations?" "I expect you to win this war with their help," Ren said. "Unless you prefer to keep losing systems to the hegemony." The Coalition war room fell silent. 14 different species represented, and not one would meet Ren's eyes. Finally, General Thawes of the Pleiadian Guard spoke. "How effective are they?" At least someone was asking the right questions. "Extremely," Ren replied. "Each unit is specialized for different combat scenarios. Alpha units are designed for infiltration and asymmetric warfare. Betas are heavy assault. Gammas handle extreme environments. Deltas are our command and control specialists." "And the ethical implications of deploying such forces?" asked a Syrian representative whose name Ren couldn't recall. "Were settled on Earth decades ago," she answered smoothly. "Now they're your ethical implications to wrestle with. The question is simple: do you want to win this war, or do you want to feel morally superior while losing it?" Another uncomfortable silence fell over the room. "We need a demonstration," Admiral Voss finally said. "Before we integrate your forces into our battle plans." Ren nodded. She'd anticipated this. The hegemony holds an outpost in the Rigel system. Small garrison, minimal civilian presence. It would make an excellent proving ground. "That outpost is heavily defended," General Thawes objected. "We've attempted to reclaim it twice." "And failed twice," Ren finished for him. "We won't fail." The Rigel outpost hung like a dark spider in the void, its weapons arrays tracking the approaching coalition ships. Intelligence suggested a garrison of approximately 2,000 hegemony troops, protected by state-of-the-art defensive systems and a small fleet of patrol vessels. From the command shuttle, Ren watched as her units prepared for deployment. They moved with that same unsettling precision, checking equipment that seemed fused to their modified bodies. None spoke, they communicated through encrypted neural links, another modification that had proven useful but pushed them further from their original humanity. "Your soldiers will die," Admiral Voss said from behind her. "The approach vectors are all covered by automated defense systems." "They're not approaching by conventional means," Ren replied. Before Voss could ask what she meant, the deployment bay doors opened. Without hesitation, Alpha and Gamma units simply stepped into the vacuum of space. No drop pods. No shuttle craft. Just modified bodies designed to survive brief exposure to vacuum, propelled by integrated thruster systems built into their armor. "By all the stars," Voss whispered, mandibles frozen in shock. "They'll breach at multiple points," Ren explained, voice clinical as she watched her troops disappear against the backdrop of space. "The hegemony won't detect them until it's too late. And then?" Ren turned to the Admiral, her diplomatic smile finally dropping. "And then the galaxy will understand why Earth's soldiers are called monsters." 18 minutes. That's how long it took Earth's specialized units to neutralize a hegemony outpost that had resisted 2 full-scale coalition assaults. 18 minutes of utter carnage that left Admiral Voss and the other coalition officers watching the helmet feeds in stunned silence. The Alpha units had breached the station's outer defenses without triggering a single alarm, their bodies adapted to mimic the electromagnetic signatures of the station's own maintenance drones. The Gammas followed, their forms modified to withstand the radiation leaking from the station's damaged reactor core, a defensive measure the hegemony had implemented specifically to deter boarding parties. What happened next made Ren question, not for the first time, what humanity had sacrificed in its desperation to survive. Turn it off, General Thawes said, his spined crest flattening against his skull, a sign of extreme distress among Pleiadians. We've seen enough. Ren kept her expression neutral as she deactivated the feed. The last image, an Alpha unit moving with impossible speed through a corridor of hegemony soldiers, its augmented limbs weapons in themselves, hung in her mind. That was, efficient, Admiral Voss managed finally. That was a massacre, countered the Syrian representative. That was war, Ren replied. The station is secure. Hegemony forces eliminated. Critical intelligence captured. 0 coalition casualties. The coalition war room erupted in overlapping arguments. Some officers were clearly horrified. Others, particularly those from species whose homeworlds had already fallen to the hegemony, appeared grimly satisfied. Ren let them argue. Earth had made its point. The question now was whether the coalition's moral qualms would outweigh their desperation to win. Admiral Voss raised a limb, silencing the room. Captain Navarro, a word in private. Your units don't just kill the enemy, do they? Voss asked once they were alone. They're harvesting genetic material. Ren felt a chill. The Admiral was more observant than she'd given him credit for. Adaptation is key to our combat philosophy, she answered carefully. You're studying the hegemony's biology. For what purpose? Ren considered lying, then decided against it. If the coalition was going to work with Earth's forces, they needed to understand what they were dealing with. Integration, she said simply. Our units are designed to incorporate useful biological traits from other species. It makes them more effective in varied combat environments. Voss's mandibles clicked rapidly. Your soldiers, consume their enemies. Not in the way you're thinking, Ren clarified. The process is more sophisticated. Targeted DNA extraction, synthetic adaptation, accelerated integration. And this is acceptable on Earth? Survival rarely concerns itself with acceptability, Admiral. When the Sagittarius conflict left us isolated, we faced threats you couldn't imagine. We adapted. We survived. Ren stepped closer. Now we're offering that survival expertise to your coalition. Voss studied her with compound eyes that revealed nothing of his thoughts. And if we refuse? Then we return to Earth, and you continue losing this war. Ren shrugged. The choice is yours. The coalition chose survival over moral comfort, as Ren knew they would. Within days, Earth's units were deployed to key battlefronts, turning the tide against hegemony forces that had seemed unstoppable just weeks before. But victory came with complications. Your Delta, 3 unit integrated Cervelian neural structures without authorization, Admiral Voss accused during their weekly strategy session. Ren reviewed the report on her tablet. Delta, 3 had indeed adapted after an encounter with Cervelian merchants who turned out to be hegemony sympathizers. The adaptation was defensive, she replied. The Cervelians attempted a psychic attack. The Cervelians are coalition allies. Cervelians who were passing intelligence to the hegemony, Ren countered. My unit detected the deception and responded appropriately. By consuming their brain tissue? By neutralizing a threat and adapting to prevent future attacks of that nature, Ren corrected, keeping her voice even. The integration was limited to defensive capabilities. Voss's agitation was visible in every movement. Your monsters are evolving beyond your control, Captain. They're making independent adaptation decisions. The accusation struck closer to home than Ren would admit. The latest reports from her unit commanders showed increasing autonomy in the field, adaptations occurring without central authorization, combat strategies deviating from established protocols. They're showing initiative, she said instead. Exactly what's needed in a fluid combat environment. But later, alone in her quarters, Ren reviewed the unedited field footage with growing concern. The Delta units, supposedly the most human of her forces, were exhibiting communication patterns she couldn't interpret. The Alphas had developed camouflage adaptations not included in their design specifications. And the Gammas were integrating hegemony DNA at a rate that suggested they found something particularly valuable in the enemy's genetic code. For the first time since deployment, Ren activated her direct neural link to unit command. Status report, *, she transmitted. The response came not from an individual unit but from what appeared to be a collective consciousness, * adaptation proceeding optimally. Hegemony resistance decreasing by 23% per engagement. New capabilities emerging, *. Specify new capabilities, * Ren demanded. A pause. * Understanding. We are beginning to understand, *. Understand what, *. The hegemony is not what the coalition believes. Neither are we, *. Ren felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's temperature. Clarify immediately. The hegemony is also adapted. Not like us, their changes were imposed, not chosen. They are running from something worse, *. Worse than biological warfare and planetary strip mining, *. Yes, * came the simple response. Much worse. The revelation came during what should have been a routine operation to reclaim a coalition mining outpost. Gamma and Beta units had secured the facility when they discovered evidence that changed everything. Ren stood in the coalition war room, facing down not just Admiral Voss but representatives from every major species in the Alliance. The hegemony isn't conquering, she explained, projecting the data her units had recovered. They're harvesting resources for a mass evacuation. Their home systems are under attack from something they call, the Hollow. Convenient propaganda, General Thaz scoffed. They justify their atrocities by inventing a greater threat. It's not propaganda, Ren countered. My units have verified the data through direct neural integration with captured hegemony commanders. The room fell silent at this casual admission of what the coalition considered barbaric interrogation. The Hollow is a non-organic intelligence, Ren continued. It consumes all biological life in its path, incorporating useful traits into its drones. Sound familiar? No one spoke, but Ren could see the connection forming in their minds. Yes, she confirmed. The hegemony's tactics mirror our own because they're fighting something that operates on similar principles. The difference is, they're running. We're adapting. If this threat is real, Admiral Voss said carefully, why would the hegemony not seek alliance rather than conquest? Fear, Ren replied simply. They encountered your coalition's rigid ethical codes and knew you'd never approve the measures necessary to fight the Hollow. So they decided to take what they needed instead. And what do your units propose? Asked the Syrian representative. They don't propose. They've already acted. Ren took a deep breath. They've established communication with hegemony forces. A ceasefire is in effect in the Rigel and Procyon sectors while they exchange information. The uproar was immediate and deafening. Accusations of treason, of exceeding authority, of violating the fundamental principles of coalition warfare. Ren let them rage. When they finally exhausted themselves, she spoke again. My units were created for one purpose, ensuring human survival. They've determined that continuing this war decreases survival probability for all involved. The real threat is coming, and neither Earth nor the coalition nor the hegemony can face it alone. You've lost control of your monsters, Voss said quietly. Ren smiled. No, Admiral. I never had control. None of us did. We created beings capable of adapting to any threat, any circumstance. Now they're adapting to the biggest threat of all, extinction. And what happens when they decide we're the threat? General Thaz asked. Then we'd better make sure they still consider us worth saving, Ren replied. She activated her neural link again, this time routing it through the war room's communication system so everyone could hear. Unit command, status update, *. The response filled the room, a chorus of voices that had once been individual soldiers but now spoke with unnerving synchronicity, * coalition hegemony integration proceeding. Preliminary defensive strategies formulated. Request permission to share hollow intelligence data with coalition command, *. Ren looked around the room at the stunned faces of the coalition leadership. Well, Admiral. Do we choose survival, or do we cling to our comfortable moral frameworks while the galaxy burns? Admiral Voss's mandibles moved in what might have been resignation, or perhaps simple acceptance of reality. Send the data, he ordered. As the information flooded the coalition systems, Ren watched the expressions shift from horror to grim understanding. Earth had sent monsters in uniform, yes. But it turned out the galaxy needed monsters after all. She just hoped humanity would recognize what they'd created when this was over. Or perhaps the better question was, would what they'd created still recognize humanity? Ren touched her neural link, feeling the subtle pulse that confirmed her units were still out there, still adapting, still evolving into something beyond human imagination. The galaxy had asked for reinforcements. Earth had sent monsters. And now those monsters were rewriting the rules of existence for everyone.